Hello and welcome to another episode of Casting Views, the podcast that takes a topic each week and, as the name suggests, cast views. This week, it's another mind wipe episode, and I've not recorded one of these for a while, so I'm looking forward to this, but even more so because the subject this week, subject's probably not better than victim, is it, Dan? I don't know.
I'm not sure which I prefer, to be honest. The subject makes me sound like a lab experiment. Maybe it is. Mind wipe. I'm a lab experiment. Go for it.
Here we go. The word I wanted is the guest this week is my good friend, Dan H. from Life and also...
From Life.
From Life and the Gaming Views podcast. Hi, Dan. How are you doing?
Hello, mate. What we should do is my good friend from previous working establishments, walking the dog and life in general.
Yeah,
very well.
I keep saying I'm notoriously bad for intros, and that just sums it all up. So,
hey, it works for me. I'm used to this chaos, right? every week we record Gaming Views is the same. How many edits shall we make this time?
Well, now peek behind the curtain for you. What people don't realise is we've been recording this for about 30 minutes already. We're only a minute in. Yeah.
Say 30 seconds now, Dan, and then edit that bit.
Look, all right, bad intro aside. Dan, obviously, people will have heard you on here a couple of times when we were trialling the Gaming Views podcast. But of course, we are co-hosts of Gaming Views podcast. And if you're not listening to that, people, I'll put the link in there. Go subscribe now. But yeah, Dan, tell us a little bit about yourself, about how you are, and about Gaming Views.
I'm super well. And I say that in all honesty. I'm, living my best life at the moment. The Switch 2 arrived today, one reason. So there you go. Not that my life revolves around gaming. Just got back from a short break last week. So on fine form. Gaming Views, wow. I mean, it's just been a blast. The last kind of 6 weeks have just been incredible. I am not, as people will know from the things I say and the numbers I get wrong and everything else, a seasoned podcaster. However, many thanks to you for introducing me to that world. And I've just enjoyed every single minute of it. We're 6 episodes in now, and I barely repeated myself other than mentioning RoboCop. So that's
done it now as well.
Yes, I'm going to switch that to Half-Life from now on, I swear. So yeah, it's just been phenomenal. Look, we take a different subject or a different deep dive every week, and we go into detail on it. Sometimes it'll be a bit of news. Sometimes it'll focus on, a specific game or a specific topic. And we've done, a number of things. We've done the RPGs, we've done Half-Life, we've done a general pilot on just us and our history of gaming. Yeah, and look, my background doesn't just revolve around gaming. I am a massive nerd, as you'll probably find out over the next hour or so. I grew up with a pretty large family, and my solace and calm from the space of chaos that was that family was nerdy, geeky things like comic books and sci-fi movies and fantasy and Dungeons and Dragons. And if you could take a peek into my office where I sit now doing this, you would see and you've seen this, Dan, right? So you would see I am surrounded by more Lego builds than probably anything else. I also have detached Deadpool heads and Deadpool Build-A-Bears. And I have lots of video games consoles and dragons and or just all sorts. So it's just littered around my room. It really needs to tidy up, to be fair. Actually, now I'm feeling quite guilty. But yeah, so look, new to podcasting, absolutely enjoying it and loving doing what we're doing. I'm really, really pleased to be here doing this with you. I listen to these of your casting views, and I've listened to lots of them historically as well. And it's one of my favourite episodes. So I've been jonesying to get on here and do this with you.
No, well, I really appreciate that. And there's a lot you said there. I want to pick up on a couple of things. So I'm not going to call you, I was going to say I was agree with you, but I'm not going to call you a big nerd. What I am going to say is you're a massive lover and fan of the geekdom, what I think is called geekdom. And yeah, it's brilliant. And as Dan said, it's, obviously I've been around his house a number of times, and it's a treasure trove of really cool stuff, isn't it?
Thank you, mate. I appreciate that. Yeah, I think that, and you think that. When my Lego starts creeping into the living room, and my wife's like, "Why have we got a Wolverine's claw as an ornament?" I'm not sure she agrees.
If you need to keep anything around my house, just let me know. But
your shelves are going to be full behind you. That's what's going to happen with my stuff.
Yeah, that's it. And you said about gaming views. It is funny. It's I think that has come along at the right time as well for me, because I said to you, I'd wanted to do sort of something on gaming, and you then kind of like, yeah, I'll be up for it. And what I like is you've kind of pushed to do things different for me as well. Like we've now started doing video on gaming views, as of, well, I think this goes out in a couple of weeks. So hopefully by the time this has gone out, we've done 2, maybe 3 video episodes on YouTube, which I'd been thinking about for a while, but you just kind of carry on as you are. So you've like, now I want to do video, and we've got it done.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the main reason I wanted to do that was because when you told me you'd only be able to do it with a green screen, I wanted to see you suffer sitting at a tiny little circle of green that I can then edit any backdrop I want onto. I'm joking.
I've got a huge amount of trust in you. I hope everyone listening, that's the kind of trust I got in this man.
You'll know when Dan and I fall out, because literally his backdrop will not be what he's expecting. But no, I think we complement each other quite well. You are very much a planner and you know where you want things to be and how you want them to be. I add a little drop of chaos into that, and I think together we come up with, in the same way we complement each other around the whole gaming scene, right? You are, you love your retro, you love revisiting things you've done or haven't done previously on older generations and things like that. And I'm very much so, I love the new stuff. I'm a day one purchaser, whether or which basically means huge buyer's remorse all the time. But I think that complements us really well. I can, I've got the PS5 and the Switch, you've got the Xbox and the other retro stuff. So I think, in that respect, it works really well for us. And, we coming from different backgrounds and different, growing up in a different way in different spaces, we just, I think it works really well, and I'm genuinely, not blowing smoke up, but I'm genuinely really pleased about the whole thing. And I think it's going really well. And I love doing it with you.
No, I appreciate it. And the same, I think what I would say to people is, honestly, look, even if you don't think you're into gaming, if you've heard the last sort of 5-6 minutes conversation, that's kind of what we're like on the show. We're not,
pretty much.
When I say we're not, we don't take things seriously, it's not that it's not a serious pod, but we're, like you said, we take a subject and we're having that conversation we're having now. It's just 2 friends talking about something they love doing, right? It's
exactly. Yeah.
And again, that's kind of what I've really enjoyed, because I've enjoyed doing this. I mean, coming up to, actually, this will be episode 198. So it's coming up to 200 episodes. Almost in September this year, it'll be 4 years.
I'm going to get you a cake.
Thank you. There is no cake, isn't it?
Is that a do you not have to do that joke yet? Yes, I'm going to get you a 200, maybe just a muffin, but I'm going to get you a cake.
Well, there you go. Well, I look forward to that. Yeah, I look on our walk on a Sunday. But yeah, I've always had the idea of wanting to do games, but a gaming podcast, but just didn't want to do that on my own. And, it's just one of those things. So I thought, no. And then, like I said, no, you've come along, like I said, with the energy that we, needed for it. And yeah, you take it to it straight away. So like I said, if you're not listening, just give us a try, a couple of episodes. And even if you don't, still press the subscribe button, right?
100%. Always press the subscribe button. I have to say, my arm is still recovering from RSI from the amount you had to twist it to get me to do it, though. So, it's that was a joke.
Well, like I said, I'm just dreading when it gets to the real hot summer days and I've got that green screen right up behind me and I've got the light shining on it.
No, we're going to get your room sorted before then.
What, just paint the room green? Paint the room green?
No, we'll do the whole works. We'll get you looking like mine for a fraction of the cost. It'll be not the same. It'll be Dan P.
Actually,
we'll get it.
Someone said to me at work today, what I should do is get you to stand up, take a screenshot of your background, and then you can put that on the green screen.
I did think of that. I did think of very much of just doing a shot of my background and putting it on yours. It would look a bit weird. Why has he got the same?
Just a picture of you.
Yeah. With my arm around you.
Oh, all right, look. Well, thank you for that little intro there. We'll hear from some friends of mine and we'll come back very shortly.
In a world with so many movies to choose from, one hero will rise. The Movie Wire Podcast with host Justin Henson. Tune in wherever you listen to podcasts.
Right, Dan. So do you know what? This is, when you said you'd do this, I was really pleased because kind of what you've said before the break, what I know about you, how much you love pop culture. I've been really looking forward to having you on for this, to hear what you're choosing and know that for some of these, it was probably a very difficult thing to try get it down to maybe just 3 items.
Absolutely. I was at pains for a lot of these things, but thankfully and genuinely, this actually, I'll tell you now, because while I was listening to some of your previous ones, and particularly the ones from the guys at the Dad Podcast, Middle-Aged Dad Podcast, so a number of their picks were ones that would have been on my list.
Oh, really?
Yeah, 100%. So starting with Breaking Bad, I've always said out of any program, if I was ever one I was going to wipe and watch again, it would be that. And I didn't want to do a repeat because I think those guys did it. I think it was Raging Rich, and I think he did it succinctly and beautifully. So I was like, I'm not going to do that. Another one was Buffy.
Yep.
And again, I was like, no, I'm not going to do that. So those guys picked up on some stuff that I was going to pick up on. So I've steered away from that, and I've gone to my other choices, which hopefully you won't have been on there. Maybe a tiny bit out there for a couple of them, but I think most people will, especially if you're a bit of a geek or a nerd, you'll know and appreciate them. Maybe even love them.
Like I said, knowing how much you love, like all things media, whatever you pick, I'm going to be fascinated by. So we are going to start in the random order in terms of how I wrote them to WhatsApp to you. I'm going to keep it probably in that order. Let's start with TV.
Okay, so number 1 on my list, and you might remember this from when we worked together because I used to talk about it non-stop. It's a comedy show, BBC Two, probably around early 2000s, somewhere like that, but it's The Mighty Boosh.
Oh, you know, just when you said when we were working together, now people, just bear in mind, this was probably 2006, 2008, something like that.
Yeah.
I think I knew straight away what you were going to say. So The Mighty Boosh, go for it.
My sense of humour is quite off kilter most of the time. You know, I'll find people I click with in terms of my sense of humour. Sometimes it can be a bit dark, sometimes it can be a bit silly. And those are the people that tend to gravitate to my orbit and vice versa. And this is very much a programme that sits firmly within that little bit dark, little bit silly area. You know, it's just, you can tell that the guys who created this, so this is Noel Fielding. Anyone who watches Bake Off will know. And his comedy partner basically created The Mighty Boosh as a stage show. They toured and did the Fringe in Edinburgh, and they did a few smaller pieces. And then they drifted apart and then drifted back together as The Mighty Boosh and managed to get a show commissioned, a pilot originally, I think, and then went on to create 3 seasons across BBC Two. And it's just one of the most absurd, funny, weird comedy shows. So the first season is set in a zoo. They are essentially zookeepers. They have a mystical shaman called Naboo who helps them on weird missions each week. It's got Rich Fuller in it. It's also got, my word, Toast of London. Why can't I remember his name? Matt Berry. Thank you. Thank you, Dan.
Yeah. Oh, Matt Berry. Yeah, how can we forget Matt Berry?
So it's got Matt Berry in it. And he is genuinely hilarious in the whole show. He plays essentially Dixon Bainbridge, who is the keeper of the show, the owner of the zoo. And he's just this misogynistic, angry little man. And Rich Fuller plays just a weird little sidekick to him. And they're always at odds. And there's mutant kangaroos and there's, you know, hunts in the Arctic for mystical gems. It's genuinely warped and insane. And then in the second season, it moves to them having a flat share in what I assume is London. It might not be London, where they're trying to be a kind of goth electro band. Yes. So it's all a bit weird, right? And then the third season, it's an antique shop that they own. Yeah. But there are recurring characters that go throughout it, like the Hitcher, like old Greg, you know, and once you've seen them, you kind of go, oh my God. And they're all played by the actors within the show.
Yeah.
And it's just a genuinely funny show that I, on numerous occasions, fell about laughing, you know, without being able to recover. I went to see them live a number of times. They did, I don't think it was the O2, but I think they might have done Wembley. They've done some big venues as well with the show. And again, they just kind of take the TV show to another level. It's just a genuinely beautiful piece of work and very, very funny. So yeah, if I could have the opportunity to not see that again, and that's the thing for this, I took this genuinely as a mind wipe. If I'd never seen it before and I could see it again fresh for the first time, that would be on my list.
And this is what I was going to say. You'd love it as you did the first time, because things can age and that, but you'd love it as the first time. And what I've got to say is, it was you that got me onto this program, because as you said, you did quote it. So at work, you just quote these random lines. And yeah, I then remember buying the DVD box set, I think, of the first 2 series, and absolutely loving it. Now, I was a bit wary because these zany, these really weird comedies, I'm not usually a fan of. Like, incur the wrath now, but I didn't really get on with Monty Python.
Okay.
Things like that. But the Mighty Boosh, as you said, I just couldn't stop laughing. I remember watching it, and it's just, I think it's also because they're quite likable and as people as well, so they come across as a really good group of people. And it's just, you said Rich, was it Rich?
Rich Fuller.
Yeah. I remember there's a couple of times where he's singing a song, like he's singing I Can't Go For That, and it's almost like a minute or two of it, and then he stops the player and he goes, and that's why I can't go for that.
I don't like cricket.
I don't like cricket as well. Yeah. He's singing about that for 2 minutes. He stops it and then just says, and that's why I don't like cricket.
And then the other two walk in dressed as caveman, not being able to speak English. It's that level of weirdness that you just go, what the hell's going on? But it's so funny at the time that you can't help but laugh, because it's just situations and things that you go, I don't know how.
Noel Fielding as the moon.
Noel Fielding as the moon is a stroke of genius. And then you've got, I don't know who played the character, but like he's a little alien head with tentacles that they carry around in a papoose.
I think that was him as well. I think that was Noel Fielding.
It probably was. Yeah, it was. Yes, it was. You're right. And he plays the hitcher. It's just so good. And they work really well together. They work in this way where, one is the straight man and one's just a bit of a jackass. And it's that interplay between the two of them, because they don't always get along, but they really love each other. It's that kind of, and that's what I really enjoy about it. And I think I've always, where comedies are concerned, particularly where it's like, either an ensemble or a duo, I've always loved that kind of straight man to the crazy. And one of my all-time heroes in comedy has always been Eric Morecambe.
Okay.
Because just his, how he and Ernie Wise worked was just so funny, and I often at Christmas, they'll recycle the old shows and you're sitting in, with Andre Previn and things, and I'll sit and watch them, and I will still, even though I know what's coming, I will still be laughing my socks off, because I just think they're just a genius pairing, and so very funny, and it just makes such a good grounding in comedy, and that's what, they do really well in the Mighty Boosh.
Well, I've got 2 more things before we move on to your next choice. But one is, because of that show, I've just really, really liked Noel Fielding now. So I'm really happy, because I love the Bake Off anyway. So I'm really pleased he's the host of that. But he's now in my list. When people ask me, which 3 people would you want to meet, the dinner party on my show or the night out for a drink, whatever, he's in my list, because I would just love to get in that head of his, or maybe I wouldn't, I don't know, but I would. I just think he's the sort of person that you could sit at a table and have a pint with.
100%, and he's one of these people that's had such an unusual journey, but also fascinating in that he knows Courtney Love really well. I think they lived together at one time in London. He's had this incredible journey and knows all of these very famous people. And so I think you're right, being able to have that conversation with them, go, how the hell did that happen? How did you fall into that kind of circle? I mean, look, and we should give props to Julian Barrett as well, right? Because as the straight man, I think he carries a lot of the weight. If you, it's easy to act like an idiot all the time, right? But trying to keep a straight face,
program.
100%. Yeah. And he does his comedy timing. Yeah. And some of the things he does, like playing an old Russian woman when he does, and trying to sing a song in Arctic conditions, it's just, I mean, if you watch it, you'll see what I mean. But it's just a work of genius. So, yeah, that one locked.
Yeah, and the only other thing is, I'll say hi again to Joey and Alex of the Game Club Pod, because often when we're online having a chat, even they're quoting Mighty Boosh quotes. So.
I'm going to love those guys even more. I've not met them face to face, but I genuinely look. We might end up with you doing gaming views alone. I might jump ship and just
no amalgamation. You're locked into contract. Right, moving on. What's number 2?
Okay, so I'm wondering whether should I stick with the comedy, or shall I move on to my? Do you want to break from comedy, or do you want to carry on with comedy and then go a little bit different?
Let's carry on with comedy.
Carry on with comedy. So my second one, which I'm hoping the kind of people who listen to your stuff and listen to our stuff will know, is a little Channel 4 program that used to be on a Friday night post-pub before Eurotrash called Spaced.
Okay, yeah, oh yeah, okay.
One of the very best comedies ever produced. Only ever 2 seasons, much to everyone who watched it's disgust. And it launched the careers of Simon Pegg, Nick Frost, Jessica Hines. Look, Simon Pegg's like, Tom Cruise's best mate now, right?
Well, this is what I was going to say. It's astonishing. I was watching Dead Reckoning the other night, and I'm just looking at it and thinking, Spaced.
My wife and I wore out the VHS recordings and the DVDs, rewatching it, and now we still watch it it was on Netflix for a little while. I think it's back on 4OD. It's a weird slice of observational stroke random hilarity about 2 people who fall into a flat share. And I don't think I'm spoiling anything by saying this. So Jessica Hines and Simon Pegg fall into sharing of a flat under the mistaken belief that the only way they could do it was to appear as a couple.
Yeah.
As if they're dating, because that's the only day Marsha, who's the landlady, would let them stay there. She didn't care. That was nothing to do with it. And this is a running joke for the kind of the almost the 2 seasons. They're joined by Nick Frost, who is Simon Pegg's character's best friend, who got thrown out of the TA, right, the Territorial Army, for being too insane. And he's basically just an absolute nutball, but a lovable nutball. And there are so many pop culture references in that show, particularly around wrestling, Star Wars, my God, The Matrix, and homages and flashback. There's so many things in it, and these you could tell, like, when I used to watch it, I just wanted to be their best mate because they were my kind of people, and it's just such a cleverly, sharply written piece of work whose DNA. And trust me, if you've not watched Spaced, but you've seen the Cornetto trilogy, you will kick yourself, because the DNA of those films, Shaun of the Dead, and particularly Hot Fuzz, right? If you love Hot Fuzz, go and watch Spaced, because that is where a lot of what happens in Hot Fuzz, like, you'll see how that interplay happens. It's a show that is just one of the genuinely funniest things I've ever seen. I mean, I'm thinking about certain scenes from it now and laughing. Just the conversations they have. There's a lot of, they're kind of stoners and they're, but it's a joy to watch, and they play off and riff off almost everything, almost any pop culture movie or sci-fi or TV program or anything you can imagine. They play off of it and get a joke out of it. And it's brilliant.
It's funny because, again, I clearly remember you talking about this. Now, I've only seen it the once, and not because I don't like it, but I've just never got around to seeing it again, so I remember very little about it. But what's funny is the 2 shows you've picked so far is almost, I won't say necessarily the inception, but the inception of a double act of people. It's almost, so you see the Mighty Boosh with the 2 of them, where they've then gone on to, obviously, Simon Pegg and Nick Frost have both had, great careers since then.
But they were best mates at the time. So Simon Pegg and Nick Frost, and actually the show is not really about those 2. So the protagonists in it are really Simon Pegg and Jessica Hines. So actually the interplay is actually between those 2, as Jessica Hines is a budding author. Well, I say author. She is a budding author, but ends up kind of writing mainly for women's magazines and things like that. And Simon Pegg is a comic book artist, and I think that another reason I interconnected with that really, really closely was because that's what I wanted to do originally. So I used to love drawing. I did art and design at college. And I still draw now. I still sketch, particularly for my kids and stuff. And it's always comic book characters. And his work was actually the work that they show in the show Spaced. That is his work is by a guy called Simon Beasley, who used to work for 2000 AD. Used to deal with it, and his work is phenomenal. I mean, if you ever get a chance to see any of his work around Sloane or Slane, whatever you want to call it, or Wolverine, or his work is phenomenal in that space, and he does some of the work they show on the show. And he was a big fan, and they were all friends as well, and look, and Edgar Wright, directed and wrote a load of the shows with those guys, so he was behind the camera, which is why when you look at shows like films like Hot Fuzz, Shaun the Dead, they were just taking what they were doing in those shows to the next level. And my challenge to you is go back and watch it, right? Go back on 4OD. It looks a little bit dated now, but trust me, Dan, you will thank me. If you go back and watch that, you'll be talking to me on Sunday going, oh my God, I watched it. And you're right. It's just brilliant.
I will do it. We may have to do a watch along. Right. I'm going to move you on now, just because I'm just looking at time. Right. What's your final choice in TV?
So we'll be quick with this one. And this is mainly because the reason I want to do this is not so much about my love for it or my knowledge of it or anything else, but this is more about the fact that when I was a kid, I used to spend a lot of summers in Wales at my grandparents' house. And my grandma passed away recently. She was 99. So she was, she had a good innings, she was, bless her. But I used to go and visit her in Wales. And in Wales, they had the precursor to satellite TV, and I used to watch a show on there that I loved, and I remembered it all the way through my life. And it was a show that in the UK, when it was screened, was called Battle of the Planets. In Japan, where it was created, it was called Team Science Ninja Gatchaman. It's an anime, and I'm not a massive anime fan. Used to be. I used to love Fist of the North Star and Akira. I went to the Phoenix Scala in London to watch Akira premiere in the UK, so I used to love all that, and I kind of fell out of love with it. But Battle of the Planets, it was about a group of 5 teenagers who essentially could transform into superheroes, and they used to go on missions every week. And it just, I can't remember huge amounts about it. They tried to do a kind of a westernized launch of it back in 2008 time, I think. And the guy who did Batman the Animated Series, Tim, can't remember his name, Tim Dinny, but he was involved in it, and they released a kind of a trailer for it, like a CGI version of it, but it never took off. But that show, if I could kind of not have seen it and go back and watch it again, which I probably could now because I've forgotten it all. At that time in my life, it just used to be absolute joy. That and spending my summers with my grandparents and having a brilliant time in Wales and being able to watch that show.
Well, I'm looking at it now because when you said it rang a bell, but then you said, oh, like anime, and I thought, no, I'm not sure I saw it there. I'm looking it up and I absolutely saw this, and the memories are coming back now. Yeah. Sort of like the 90s, that kind of time, or late 80s, early 90s, kids' TV had some great cartoons / anime like this. We had so many, didn't we?
Yeah, we did. Yeah. But this is the only place I remember seeing it. And it was because they had whatever maybe it was satellite TV or whatever it was they had at their house. But, I can't remember kind of seeing it anywhere else or, having the opportunity to watch it anywhere else. And I just, when I was trying to kind of dredge up my memories of things I'd loved, there's so many, but that kept flooding back to the surface. And I was like, oh, God, I love that show.
It's very different to your other 2 choices. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Look, and there are so many dramas and things like that I love, but I couldn't kind of pull out ones that either somebody hadn't already mentioned or that, I would struggle to articulate.
85 episodes. Yeah. 1978 to 1980. Blimey.
Yeah, and you'll recognise they had a robot companion, and they had like a
There's always a robot bag, companion,
always, right? And he looked a bit like R2D2 weirdly. And they had a major bad guy who would always be at the bottom of everything. And so Mighty Boosh Space and Battle of the Planets.
Okay, right. I really like that. So thank you for that. We're going to move on to the subject. I always say I tend probably not to have too much of a conversation on because I'm not. I haven't been for years as well. I'm not much of a reader.
Ooh.
I used to love reading, and now it's probably limited to comic books every now and then. But yeah, what are 3 books?
So one of these is a comic book. The other 2 are not. I am and have been quite a prolific reader throughout my adulthood, whether it's books on kind of leadership or DevOps and things like that, things to do in my career. I love reading some of those nonfiction things, but more often than not, it is like last year I went through the entire Jack Reacher series just within a year easily. probably within about 8 months. I was voracious. So I was reading them on the train. I was reading them at home and at night before bed. It's my way of decompressing at night. Unfortunately, and probably due to you, I now mainly read comic books at night because I subscribe to Marvel Unlimited. So I'm going through the history of Marvel at the moment. So I'm just on Wolverine. So I'm kind of going through all those. Let's start with the one that isn't a comic book. So the first book I'm going to choose, mainly because one, I'm looking at it right now and it's still falling to pieces, is Stephen King's It. This was a book I picked up at school, weirdly enough. I was about 14, maybe 13, and it was in the library at school. And I was like, oh, quite interested. I'll pick that up. Now, for anyone who's ever read it, it is not a book for a 13-year-old to read. There is quite a lot of naughty words, sexual content, and unsurprisingly, horror. My mum found it in my bag and wrote a letter of complaint to the school, at which point it was removed from the shelf. So I didn't actually get to finish it. I was about a third of the way through it. So when I was old enough, I was probably about 16 or so, I picked it up and read it. And I must have read that book double digits easily. And every time I read it, I find something new or some different way to connect to it, depending on the stage I'm at in my life or, what it is. Because it's I'm sure people have read it or seen the film. Lots of people have seen the film. But it's essentially a story of kids growing up in a little town called Derry in Maine, which is where Stephen King writes a lot of his books around. And there is a presence there that essentially has been killing people, or as far as people know, but the population goes missing at certain points in history. And these kids fall into why it happens. So it's a little bit of a detective story, but it's more, as you read it, about how those kids grow up, and then the story revisits them as adults, and all this interplays throughout. So it's not like a bit and bit. You actually start the book at one of their houses when they're older, and then it flashes back and forward. But it's done in such a beautiful way, and it was, I'm a massive fan of Stephen King, and I think it's one of those books where he really hit his stride. Because I've read a lot of his earlier works, like The Dark Tower, and that was one I'd potentially thought about putting on here. And particularly the first Dark Tower book, you can read, when you read it, you kind of go, oh, this is him finding his way as an author. Look, he could still write 10 times better than I could, but you know it's not true where he is now or where he's been. And then as you watch the progression of the Dark Tower books, you see his writing grow throughout his career. But I think it is one of those books where he'd really hit his stride, and it was kind of around the same time as things like, or shortly after things like Carrie and Cujo and books like that, where he, as an author, he came into his own and created like the Tommyknockers and all these sorts of things. But it, for me, stands out as it's just a beautiful piece of work and such a well-written book, and properly scary as a horror. It is a proper scary book.
It is interesting what you say, because Stephen King, I'd only read a couple, and it was probably, again, a similar age when I was at school. I remember reading Carrie and, Cujo, you mentioned it. I think a cousin or someone had it, family member had it. And, it's horror, so I think that's what would have appealed to me. But when I was younger, I absolutely loved reading. And like you said, it was his writing style as well. The books were just interesting to read, let alone that you were after that next horrible scene. It was an exciting book. It brought you on that adventure, right?
And the level of detail about the environment. I mean, he's so passionate about, where he grew up and, the environment in which he grew up, and the way he's able to portray that through, not just through the eyes of a different character, but just talking and setting the scene and the scenery and, the world that they inhabit.
Yeah.
It's just, there's very few authors out there who can do that half as well as he can and still keep you engaged.
Yes.
Because sometimes it often comes off as a laundry list or a tick list of, the colour of the trees or things like that. The way he does it and the nuances he puts in it. And it's such a beautifully written book, and arguably one of the scariest antagonists in a book ever, right? In Pennywise.
As villains, as antagonists go, it's still in pop culture. I know there was they remade it a couple of years ago, didn't they? But
yeah, they did.
Even before that, Pennywise is just in the consciousness, isn't it?
It's just super scary clown. I mean, clowns are scary anyway for most people, right? I mean, they don't bother me weirdly, but a lot of people say, what is scary, and they go, oh, clowns are really scary. My wife don't like clowns, but I'm like, it's just a clown. But then you see a clown like that, or you read about a clown in that way, and you're like, I probably wouldn't need to go. He turns into a bloody werewolf. I'm probably all right, But yeah, just so descriptive, so beautifully written, and just a great horror book. Just a phenomenal book.
Great start. Okay, so what's your next pick?
My next pick is, I'll go to the graphic novel. So this is, again, a book I read, and I'm now on my third copy of it because the other two fell to pieces, and that is Frank Miller's Dark Knight Returns. So I'm a big fan of, I guess you call them kind of Elseworlds or what ifs, those kind of things, what if these things happened? So I've just finished reading all of Old Man Logan and Dead Man Logan, which are just brilliant as well. And then, like Rain, which is kind of the Spider-Man version of him when he's older. But this one was one I picked up probably not long after it was published, actually. I didn't buy the individual issues, but picked up the graphic novel when it came out. And for those of you who don't know, so it's the tale of Bruce Wayne. He's old, he's retired Batman. He still is a thrill seeker, so he races cars at high speed to try and get his juices going. He can't sleep. He's like, his mind's all twisted. He doesn't know what he's doing. He's in his, I don't know, what is he, late 60s, something like that in this. And something happens that triggers him, and he decides he's going to go back to being Batman. In fact, he has somnambulism, so he sleepwalks, and he finds himself turning on the lights in the Batcave and decides he's going to go back to being Batman. But he's old and he's slow and he's really struggling, and people have forgotten who he was, or at least believe he's now this criminal. And it's this interplay of him surviving in a whole new world that's taken over by mutants and kids who file their teeth, so they can attack people, and deal in weapons, and all of the kind of, a number of the Justice League characters play back in. So the Atom, Superman, Wonder Woman. So these characters all interplay throughout this story as well. And it's a big old book. And Frank Miller's art is just on point, man. I mean, you couldn't have wanted a better artist to deliver that story in that way. If someone like Greg Capullo or someone like that had done the same artwork for that, it wouldn't have had the same effect, because it's not beautiful art, but it's amazing art. Do you know what I mean? It's like, there's some artists who can create beauty in comic books. Jim Lee was one of those, but there's some people who can create phenomenal art that hits the moment. And it's a weird book in that it also references things like the Reagan era and the 80s really heavily, and Russia and the Cold War and things like that. So it's a really odd book. And he ends up getting embroiled with this, the Joker comes back, Two-Face comes back. But one of the other characters in it is a girl called Carrie Kelly, who is essentially becomes Robin. But she's like a 13-year-old gymnast. And she ends up getting wrapped up with her, but he knows it's the wrong thing to do because all the other Robins have died and things like that. So it's just, you can probably tell I love the book. Absolutely love it. I've actually got a book about the book. Frank Miller kind of telling how he came up with it and all those sorts of things. It's just, I love it to bits. And if I could not have read it and read it again.
See,
absolutely.
I've got that as well. And I've said before, I think I've said on here that of all the characters, I think Batman is my favourite, but mainly because the cast of villains. And I just find the stories are often, there is that element of humanity, or there's that human emotion kind of that runs through the story. And like you said, bitter old man reluctantly takes on young apprentice kind of apprentice, but you know what I mean. And it is just a classic. I mean, if you say that in comic book circles, everybody's aware of it, right?
Absolutely. I mean, you only have to show them the picture of him jumping in front of the lightning, and everyone goes, "Oh yeah, that's where it's from," And it's just such a, and so many other books and even comedies have referenced that very picture, of him jumping in front of the lightning, and that just the silhouette of him. Yeah, it's just brilliant. I'm going to read it again tonight, actually.
And what's your third choice?
My third book, I'm not going to go into a ton of detail. I could, but it feels unfair given our time limits. It's a book called Elric of Melniboné.
That I do not know.
I wasn't sure you were. So, written by an author called Michael Moorcock, a seminal British author, kind of Tolkien-esque in his approach to his writings. And so he wrote a series of books, a lot of books. He's very prolific, about a cosmic entity, I guess, called the Champion Eternal. And the Champion Eternal took on many different forms through many different books. And one of the forms he took on was the form of a character called Elric. And Elric was one of the last surviving descendants of the population of Melniboné, which is this kind of cruel, kingdom of dragon riders, right? So, and he suffers from crippling albinism. So he's an albino. He's really frail and weak. And the way he relies on, and the thing he relies on to power is not only potions. He's a sorcerer, but he relies on potions and things to get himself through the day almost. He also has a weapon called Stormbringer, which is his sword, which basically powers him by devouring souls. But it's pure evil. Right. And it's basically this story about his cousin Yurkun wants to usurp the throne. And in the book, Elric basically says, do you know what? So they fight, he wins, but he basically says, I don't care, you have it. Have the throne. I don't want it anymore. And he goes out into the wider world. And that book is the start of his journey through his world. And then he gets pulled into all these kind of, again, one of the true first kind of beginnings of what you'd call the multiverse. So that's what the Champion Eternal was. There was lots of different Champion Eternals, and he ends up getting pulled into their universes in different ways. So he appears in different stories and different things. There was a band, Hawkmoon, who wrote songs about those adventures and things, and released albums about it. And it's just, if you love fantasy, if you love Tolkien, even if you love kind of Song of Fire and Ice and those sorts of things, it's got that depth of level of detail in across the Champion Eternal books. But the Elric stories, for me, are the things that grab me. And the reason is I shared a room with my brother, my older brother, for a long time. And I used a lot of his kind of leftovers and things like that I used to swallow up. And so he started reading these books, and he left that one laying about. In fact, he probably left Weird of the White Wolf, which is another one of the books laid about, and I probably picked it up and then went back and got all the others, and now I've got like a compendium and all these things. But yeah, if I could wipe those, because I've remembered a lot of it, but if I could wipe that and read it again, that would be another one.
Nice. Now, I do want to move on because I actually want to jump to a subject. Do you know what? A subject that you and I don't really talk about that much. So I can't necessarily guess what your options are going to be here, but music.
Okay. So there'll be one you definitely know.
I could probably guess one, but yeah. But do you know what? It was when I was sitting there, I was thinking that we'll talk TV, films, books, games, stuff like that, but we've never really sat down and talked about music, I don't think.
No, yeah, agreed. And I am one of those really weird people when it comes to music. So I had a conversation with someone at my job recently, and they were talking to me, and I had my headphones on walking into it. They were like, "What are you listening to?" I was like, "It's probably more like what aren't I listening to?" Because I'm the person who will have all of my music songs list, and there's thousands of albums on there, and I just put them on shuffle. So I will listen to anything that comes along because I am happy with anything I've got. I love music. I'm quite eclectic. There's not a lot I don't like. I'm not a massive country and western fan. If it's on, I'll tolerate it. But but other than that, I'm happy with anything. Oh, that and Taylor Swift or pop. But I'm so quite eclectic. So my list, I'll go from top to bottom. So my first one, and one that was quite informative for my teenage years, and something that happened that I kind of just went, I've never had anything like this before, and I love it, is the Slim Shady LP.
Okay.
He's everywhere now. Everyone knows who he is. Everyone knows what he is. But at the time, when I got that album and when I first heard those songs, very few people had. And it was a game changer for me because I like I said, growing up, my brother was a massive rap fan, I guess you'd call it. So, things like NWA, Run DMC, all of those things I'd listened to continually. And then I heard, the Slim Shady LP, and I was just like, this is just amazing. It's just such a great collection of someone who's clearly got a lot of passion and anger as well, I guess, and is able to articulate that in a way. Yeah, a lot of anger, but able to articulate that in a way. And look, I know it doesn't age well, right? And it's misogynistic and things like that. And my kids now, right? My kids are, my little girls, they're 11 and 10, and they ask to listen to Eminem, and I won't let them because I'm like, there is a lot of misogyny and a lot of, and I get it. But even my wife loves Eminem. We've seen him in concert a couple of times and things, and she'll say, look, it's not right for them to hear it because they can't distinguish what's supposed to be humor versus what's not real. Yeah. So we steer them away from it where their friends listen to it, but
it's his wordplay. It's his wordplay as well.
It's phenomenal. There are a couple of tracks we've let them listen to that are ones that aren't heavy on the swearing and misogyny and things like that, but they're more interested in the speed at which he raps. So there's a song he did with another group called Speed'em, and it is just, the flow is just phenomenal. It's so quick and so rapid and so clever, and it's all done without the aid of any technology, and to have that skill, but not just that, to link and the way he rhymes and the words he rhymes and the way in which he does it, it's just like, it blows my mind.
Yeah, but he was one of the few that I remember anyway that then also, considering sort of how he started, would then have fun in some of the videos, which you wouldn't have necessarily expected if you were listening to the songs. Then you see some of the videos. Oh, like My Name Is, and I can't remember what's the other one where he's like a superhero. Oh, he's climbing up the side of a building. I can't remember.
Oh,
but
he does with Dre.
Yeah. But he likes to, it was fun seeing him have that fun side to him compared to some of the songs you would hear on the albums.
Stuff. Yeah, he does that a lot of his. I mean, if you watch the video for Houdini, which is one of his more recent ones, he brings his older version back through time. So he actually, and they do a great job of kind of and he does all the things that they did in those videos you've just talked about. So, but yeah, I love that as an album. I think there's not a bad track on it, and it's one, and that for me makes a great album. There's not a single bad track. Which leads me to my next one, of which there's not a single bad track. And I know for a fact that you will agree with me. It's just whether or not you know which album of theirs I'm talking about.
Right. So let me guess. It's going to be Oasis.
It's the mighty Oasis. You're absolutely right. Yep.
Right. Now, which album? You see...
I mean, it's not a bad track on any of them.
I was going to say, it could be any of them. So, I mean... Right, let me think about you.
What's your favourite album, Dan? Let's just ask you. Let's switch the tables. If you could only pick one, what would it be?
I think do you know what? I think it would probably be Definitely Maybe.
Yes, Dan, it's Definitely Maybe. Yes, Dan, it's Definitely Maybe. Best album out there, best tracks out there. And, well, not necessarily the best, because I think obviously they grew as a band. They learned how to apply their trade differently. Noel definitely grew as a songwriter, but Definitely Maybe for me is, I think, the original and the best album that they did.
See, I agree with you. The reason I picked, because when you asked me that, and I don't know if you had a chance to listen, I had an episode where Griffin from Reboot Deboot came on to grill me about Oasis, about my love for Oasis, and it's so hard for me to pick because, Oasis music was a part of my kind of like youth and growing up, and I absolutely love Oasis. So it could be any of the first three albums, and their second, definitely the second and third got more grand and more polished. But it's what you said. It's the rawness of Definitely Maybe. It's that real heavy guitar driven, and it's just them at their beginnings before anything, all the fame and trappings. And yeah, there's just something about that album for me that is just, pure Oasis.
The nail on the head, pure Oasis. I would love to have been at King Tut's to see, that before it was released, as an album, see them play some of those songs in their, not their heyday, because that came later, but in their youth, in their, when they were just starting out. Noel had finished being a roadie for the Inspiral Carpets and got his act together, and they'd kind of gone and created what was essentially magic, right? And I know there's a lot of bravado in those boys and the things they say, but at the time they were the one and only rock and roll band out there.
Yeah, I think
proper rock and roll.
Yeah, I have to remember how massive they were. I mean, and that's what I'm saying to you. Like, I'm looking at the track listing now. I'm not saying these are bad songs, but like Rock and Roll Star, Shaker Maker, like them, but can not listen to them again.
There are better songs than those ones on other albums. I know what you're saying.
Yeah, but like, for me, two of my all-time favourites of theirs are on there, Live Forever and Slide Away.
Slide Away. I'm so glad you said that. It's such a tune.
It's great, right? I mean, Supersonic, obviously.
Married with Children.
That's what I was going to say. To then Dixie's Diner and Married with Children, which are odd choices on that album compared to the rest of it. I mean, I could talk about Oasis all night. So yeah, and I knew that's the only one I thought I knew of yours. But yeah, no, I'm going to say it. Fantastic choice.
Yeah, I knew you'd agree. So my last one, it's an odd one. You might be familiar. You might even have it in your collection. But the reason I've chosen it is when I was quite young, so I was probably 8 or 9, my parents divorced and my dad moved away. So we didn't see him for a while, actually, a good year or so. And then we only saw him like either every weekend or every other weekend or something like that. But every time I went to his house, more often than not, I'd always ask him to put an album on, right? And it's a weird one, I'm telling you now. But the album I would always ask him to put on, and it's so haunting now, I can hear it in my head, was Jeff Wayne's War of the Worlds.
Oh, what an album.
Right?
Yeah.
And so I strongly suspect if you put that on now, once I got in the flow, I could probably recite all of the spoken pieces and probably most of the songs as well. Because there's something about music that connects you to something that's happened or your past or, something in some way. In those moments, your brain, for whatever reason, clings onto a part of that music, whether it's the lyric or whether it's, and that for me was one of those albums that did that. I'm desperately I'm hoping they come back and do the tour so I can take my dad to it because, I'd love to see that on stage. But that album was just amazing. And I made the mistake of watching the American movie of that. Not the Tom Cruise one, the original American movie of that. Yeah, that was an error. Because, my version of War of the Worlds was Jeff Wayne's version of War of the Worlds. And then when I saw the movie, I was like, this isn't War of the Worlds.
Even the cover is iconic. The cover of the album, isn't it?
Ah, phenomenal. The tripod. Yeah.
Yes, yeah,
Oolah,
yeah.
Oolah, Dan, Oolah.
And Forever Autumn, I'm just looking Forever Autumn. That's the big one, obviously, off the album, isn't it? But the funny thing was, it might still be there. And, you sort of working in London, they do, these interactive, immersive experiences.
I saw the other day, the immersive one.
I've done that. And
Did
all
you
I
do
had,
it? Oh.
yeah. You and you should, I think you would love it. All I have in my head as I was going around was Forever Autumn,
Yeah.
And I think they play it at various bits. So, I think I'd absolutely recommend it. But, yeah, it's an odd choice in terms of, sort of what your first two are and, as an album.
I told you I'm weird. I have weird eclectic, but
I love it.
It's such a haunting piece.
Music for me is like everything else for you, I think. It's, No, what a choice. What a choice. Yeah, and like I said, it's when you say War of the Worlds music, it's the album cover for me.
It's so good. My dad had the double album on LP. And I've got it in the garage, actually, because my dad lives on Narrowboat now, so he gave us all his crap to keep in the garage. and some of that is his vinyl, so it's actually up in, I just haven't got a record player. Yeah. But yeah.
Everyone go listen to that now, War of the World. Well, not now, after you've finished this.
Afterwards, maybe.
After this, please. All right, we are going to jump to... Right, let's go to films.
Okay. So I'm going to cheat to start with. Only a little bit, but if you make me pick one, I will. So I'm going to start, and I'm going to call them one thing. I'm going to start with the original Star Wars trilogy. So that's New Hope, Empire, and Jedi.
I'll allow, but what would be your one if we chose one?
Empire. And anyone who says it's not, it's wrong. just now, right? Absolutely wrong.
But go on then, go on. I'll allow it.
So yeah, so I didn't get to see Star Wars. I didn't get to see A New Hope in the cinema. Right? It was one of those things I watched probably when I was really young because, God knows, I must have been, what was it,
77, wasn't it?
77. Yeah. So I would have been a year old, right, when it came out, and when it came over here, it was probably 78, I guess.
Yeah.
Probably the year after or a few weeks after the US. But my brother was a bit older than me, and he saw it, and he had all the toys before me. But I did get to see Return of the Jedi at the cinema, which I loved. But I got to watch the others on VHS or on Christmas specials or whatever it was on TV. And I fell in love with Star Wars, probably again because of my brother. He's got a lot to blame for all of this, from a very early age. And, you talked about those trips to my grandparents and things like that. Any Christmas was always, I want Star Wars stuff. Right?
Yeah.
Not I want, please may I have Star Wars stuff, right? And I have memories of my granddad who was he was the spitting image of Eric Morecambe, by the way. But I have images of I'll show you a picture of him one day. But I have images of him. He used to take we got an ATAC walker for Christmas one, like the big lump of plastic thing, and he'd pretend to ride it around the living room, and things like that. So all these yeah, everything was interconnected with Star Wars. We've got the troop transporter, and we'd always have Star Wars figures. There'll be, little lightsabers that come off people's arms laying about the house, and missiles from Boba Fett somewhere, and but Star Wars for me was the start of a journey into sci-fi that without that, I'm not even sure I ever would have gone on. And it's such a joyful set of films. And let you say what you want about George Lucas and, Disney and everything else about it, but you just take those movies, and I'm not talking about the special editions and the original refactors and all that. The original stuff, at the time and what they did. And I probably watched nearly every documentary out there about how those things were made and when they were made and what they, they are just a piece of inspirational joy for anyone else who ever wants to make a sci-fi movie. I listened to part of, I think it was the Reboot Deboot one where you talked about Dune.
Oh yeah,
and how Dune inspired Star Wars, and yeah, I think to some extent there's probably some of that. I don't buy the whole thing though. I think it was a two-way street. I think Star Wars has done much more for science fiction in general and movies in general than any other thing, any other piece of work. Asimov, anyone. I think Star Wars has done more for general pop culture sci-fi than anything. And it's, the characters, and look, I know it's based off of, Kurosawa's work and things like that, but everything takes inspiration from everything else, right? So it's just the way life works. And I just, it's got some great dialogue and lines. It's got everything about it is memorable. I doubt there's a single person on this planet, even if they haven't seen Star Wars, they know what a Chewbacca is. They know what an R2-D2 is. They know what a Luke is or what a Han. Do you know what I mean? Like, there's a Death Star. I know what Death Star is. I've never seen Star Wars, but I know what you mean by Death Star.
Well, what I would say about it as well is like growing up as a kid, in the 80s, especially early 80s, Star Wars was that pure fantasy, wasn't it? It was the biggest escape world on TV for us as a young kid. Well, I don't want to speak for you, but I think that's the vibe I'm getting from you. It was our space opera, because even then the original one, it looked dated now, but it was fantastic to watch, wasn't it?
It was pure escapism, and it was George Lucas talks about how he was inspired by those kind of Saturday morning Flash Gordons and things like that. And, the comic books around that time, or previously, particularly the kinds of ones talked about space and space adventures, and he took that and meshed it and melded it into this thing that now it's become this bit of an unwieldy behemoth. But at the time was just like you said, it was pure space opera, and it was brilliant with it. I don't know why Empire resonates so much with me. I think everyone cites it because of the cliffhanger and because of the twist. It's not a twist anymore, but actually, I think it's the way that movie starts. There's the thing that engrossed me. The Battle of Hoth, and just the whole piece. Luke getting captured. And I'm still torn as to whether they did actually, screw his face up because he had that car accident or not. It's never really, no one's ever really gotten to the bottom of it. Lots of people will tell you different things. If you could sit down with Mark Hamill and ask him, I'm sure he'd probably tell you. But that whole piece around it, and it's even the weirdness around Leia giving him a kiss while he's sitting in the hospital bed, you still kind of go, oh, geez. But yeah, I think that journey from Hoth, through, and you introduce characters like Boba Fett and and then IG-88 and all of those kind of the bounty hunter piece, for me it's the standout of the three, and people made about Jedi and Ewoks and stuff, but I don't care.
No, absolutely. This is your mind wipe.
Yeah, so if I could get rid of them and watch them again.
fair enough. Do you before we move on, do you want to know why? I mean, other than it becomes well known that it came out in 77. Do you want to know why I always remember that New Hope came out in 77?
I would love to.
I'm going to link it back to music again. So I really love Ash, and their debut album was 1977, because two of the band were born that year, but they also said they love Star Wars, and that's the year it came out. And it starts, if I remember right, the album starts with a TIE fighter sound, I think, as if it's like flying overhead. So
nice.
I just thought I'd mention that really random thing. So yeah, that's the way I always remember what year it came out. Number 2 on your film list then.
Number 2, first DVD that someone bought for me. Not that I bought myself, but first DVD that someone bought for me. And a film that I'm still not sure why I fell in love with it. And again, it's got a bit of a weird undertone in all honesty, but still a brilliant piece of work. And it's the movie Leon.
Okay, I've not seen that for such a long time.
Which you should. So one of my favourite all-time actors, and we've spoken about this before on a few occasions, one of my favourite all-time actors is Gary Oldman. And it's one of those movies where he puts in a performance that you just don't expect. You know, he plays this twisted, narc-addicted cop who's just kind of a bit of a psycho crazy up against a hitman who, for all intents and purposes, adopts a little girl whose parents get murdered by said cop. And it's about their budding relationship, kind of father-daughter type thing. And him, this hitman, who's almost a silent hermit type guy, trying to protect her from the cops. And it's just a really, I don't know, it's just something about it. I think it's just a beautifully shot, weird, wacky movie with this weird double act who shouldn't work. But
it's a young Natalie Portman, isn't it?
Yeah, young Natalie Portman. Yeah, that's right. And it's just, look, people can read into it what they want, and sometimes I do worry about how people's minds work, because I've watched that movie and I don't see a sense of paedophilia anyway through it, but other people will say that you know, there is that undertone, and I think that maybe that's I think they're over analyzing some of this stuff. But you know, for me, I just think it's a wonderful movie about a guy who, and you know, I'm a person who's got 3 daughters, right? So I know what it's like to be protective of you know, 3 young kids. And so, you know, just seeing that and doing anything you can to make sure that they live is that true expression of being a parent. And so, you know, that movie for me, and by the time I had that movie, I had 2 kids. So, you know, by the time I saw that movie and was bought for me. So I think it was probably something tying back to that in terms of why. But yeah, if I could not have seen that and kind of watch it for the first time with fresh eyes, I'd love to do that again.
No, that's fair, because I remember at the time it being a massive film.
Yeah, Luc Besson is, you know, who hasn't really gone anywhere much with it. I mean, he's done some other stuff. He did Fifth Element and things like that. But, you know, after that, it kind of, you know, his movies became a bit more B-list, should we say.
Yeah, and just going back before we move on, yeah, Gary Oldman, someone I've really appreciated over recent years more so. I mean, you know, you got me onto Slow Horses, and he's phenomenal in that. But again, just go back to Reboot Deboot when he was on. He said there's like that meme that we're going to find at one point in our lives, we're going to take a mask off our face. We've been played by Gary Oldman all our lives because he's so good at portraying characters.
He's so good. He's so good. Yeah, he's phenomenal. Slow Horses was going to be either in one of my book lists or the TV list, but I moved away from it because it was too new for me, and I just thought, you know, so. But yeah, Mick Herron's characters in that are phenomenal.
Okay. And what's your third film choice?
My third film choice is, again, a phenomenal piece of animation, actually, that is one of those things that if I could, just purely for the reason, if I could not, I got so much joy out of watching it that if I couldn't watch it, if I couldn't have not seen it and watch it again for the first time, I would. And that is Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse.
Okay, yeah.
Those movies have done something with animation that no one saw coming, you know. And being a big fan of you know, comics and animation and all, and you know, just geekdom and superheroes in general, those movies were just eye-opening in what they achieved and how they did it. And I can't wait for the third one. You know, my daughter cried genuinely when it got to the end of that one and it finished and there was no ending for it.
Yeah.
She was genuinely really like probably.
They've delayed it so long, haven't they? Yeah.
Yeah, they have. But the amount of work that must go into that, you know, they use multiple animation techniques to do these things and to create these crazy universes. And I'll be honest, I'd read the Spider-Verse tales, the comics, and I hadn't really done anything for me. I'm like, it's all right. It's different, you know, Spider-Man 2099, blah, 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 whatever. But when they put it into a movie,
Nick Cage.
and made it what it was. Yeah, right. He's not so much into Across the Spider-Verse. He's in the first one, obviously not. But and that was potentially going to be because that was actually the first movie I went to the cinema with my daughter on my own to see. She's now nearly 12. And I just remember watching that with her, and she must have been about 8 or 9 at the time. She forced me to go and see it because I was, I wanted to go and see it, but I didn't think she'd want to because they don't really sit and pay attention. But she did through the whole thing, and she got really freaked out by the Prowler and the noise it made when the Prowler was on screen. It's kind of a howling, roaring noise, and it used to freak her out. So she was just cuddled up to me. But we watched that movie, and she really loved it. And now she's growing up. And she's kind of growing out of that sort of stuff. So she's like, I'm not that bothered, Dad. So for me, that was going to be one of them. But it was actually the second movie that I think they did such a phenomenal job on. And there's still just scenes in that where they give me goosebumps, in terms of, some of the, and it's not necessarily animation. It's the, Miles going off and kind of going, I'm going to do my own thing. Right. Screw you lot. I'm not going to be part of your game anymore. And, that sort of, I've always been a bit rebellious. And I think that kind of thing, has definitely, it resonates with me on a certain level.
Yeah. Do you know what it is with me with that film is, so, obviously, I mean, you're aware I was massively into all the Marvel films like the MCU, and that came out, and I wasn't, I wasn't sure because it was, animated, but I knew I would go see it because it looked good. And my wife will watch it, and she doesn't really do cartoons, but she loved it.
It works on so many levels as well as a movie. It's it's a fun thing to watch, right? Yeah. It's a great story, but the art in there is phenomenal.
Yeah, absolutely. Right, I know we're probably going to zip through but I want to make sure we cover everything. So, random, let's do food. And I know I know food is again another passion.
Yeah, I'm a big foodie. I cook a lot. I cook all the meals at home actually, and I love eating out. So, but I'll run through these quite quickly because some of them won't mean anything to you. So there was when I was a kid, probably mid-teens, late teens. There was a little Chinese restaurant. I don't know even a restaurant. It was a takeaway on a group of shops near my house. And whenever me and a good friend of mine, fellow nerd and geek, would get hungry of an evening, playing D&D or whatever, we'd always wander down the shop and grab some food. And it was something they did down there, which was a char siu chow mein with chips and sweet and sour sauce. And
nice.
Even now I'm sitting and salivating. Oh my God. Because I can remember, it's triggering a memory going, oh my God, it was so good. I've never found one like it. And that for me, if I could do that again, I'd do that. My second one is for my birthday last year, we went to the Hand of Flowers, Tom Kerridge's restaurant. It's not a dish that he does, but as you sit down at the table, he brings you, he didn't bring me. He's not serving me. He wasn't even there. He was off somewhere else filming a TV show. They bring you this in-house baked bread.
Oh.
And it has this, I don't know if it's like bone marrow butter.
Okay.
My God, I have never tasted bread ever like this stuff. And it's not to do with the fact it's a posh and fancy restaurant because it's just bread. But whatever they're doing with that thing, passing it through the intestines of a fairy or whatever, it's amazing. It's just such a phenomenal. It's got the right crust, the right rise, the right everything, and it was just beautiful. And I'm a massive bread fan.
I love bread.
I couldn't live without bread.
Yeah.
So that for me would also. Now I was tempted to put pizza on the list, but again, you have so many people saying pizza, and I know you're a big pizza fan, and I cook a lot of my own pizzas, so I haven't put that on the list. But my third one is almost a type of pizza, and it's one my wife and I went away to an all-inclusive in Turkey years and years ago, and while we were there, they had their own little outdoor pizza area type thing, but they cooked the most amazing lamshan, which is like Turkish pizza, but they put like a cooked lamb and tomato sauce on top of it, and then you fill it with salad and sour cream or whatever, and then and that just amazing. So 2 bread-based things in there, which is probably not healthy. All carbs, actually. It's all carbs.
Tasty.
Yeah, really good. Yeah,
I like all those. Now, going back to your first one, it's funny, isn't it? There's always something like that. Like there was a friend of mine growing up where we would go out and we would pass this shop and we would always go in it and get it. And it was a chicken tikka wrap. You know, I never.
In Nantes.
Yeah. I never got anything else from that shop. It was just that because that was our thing to do, and I love that so much. And
that's all I did.
I'm a creature of habit. Wherever I go, I look at the menu and think, "Oh, next time I'm going to have this or I'm going to have that." I always get the same thing because I just love what I love. And
I think there's certain places that's applicable to, and there's certain places I absolutely won't. Like if I go to a nice restaurant, there's this rule. I can't remember who said it. It might have been Bourdain or someone like that, but basically said, never order the same thing at a restaurant twice. Like if you're going to a nice restaurant, because if it's somewhere you go and you're familiar with, I think it's fine. But if you're going to out for a posh dinner, always have something different because you'll never be as excited or grateful of the thing you got the first time, and it will never be quite as good.
Yeah.
So, always choose something slightly different. So, generally what I do, but there are certain places where you go, no, I'm just going to have that.
Well, that's it. Because this place was like a takeaway. And so, I never had that anywhere else. So I never saw that anywhere else. So it'd be, I'm just going to have that and grab it. But it would also be almost like not a tradition, but you know what I mean? It's that habit. You and your mate, you're walking back and you just dip in, grab that. And as you're walking home, you're eating that and talking about it. Okay. Another one, which I'm curious to know, is sports. Now, I probably should have said to you, but you if you've listened, you probably get it. So it's not anything you've had to have done. It could be a sporting event that you've watched. You don't have to have attended. It could be on TV, but sporting events. And again, it's not
I've
something
only got the one.
Talk about. Okay, because you're not a football person, are you?
I'm not a football person. I'm not a sporty person in the slightest. I grew up a lot around boxing. My brother was a prolific boxer, particularly Thai boxing, and he loved it. And actually, this probably stems again from him. It's probably his fault. There was going to be, I was toying with the idea of an American football match on there, but actually, it's one event that I find fascinating, mainly because of all the hype that surrounded it at the time, and the fact that at that time, particularly involving two black sportsmen at the pinnacle of their career, and the press and everything it generated. So I would love to be able to watch the Foreman Ali fight again, the Rumble in the Jungle, because I've only ever seen it a few times. But it always stood out as one of those, even when you see some of the clips of Ali, essentially what feels like playing with his food. I know that's a terrible way to put it, but, in terms of how he fights and what, and he was at the height of his career. And I think, just to be able to get the opportunity to see that, and if I could go back in time and watch it even better, but just to be able to see that again, without, I probably could, to be honest. I've probably forgotten most of it now. But again, and it all goes back to, I spent a lot of time with and around my brother at that age, and he was heavily into boxing and stuff, and he'd put, videos on, and he'd talk about Rocky Marciano and things like that. But just going back and be able to see that, both George Foreman and Muhammad Ali in their heyday would be phenomenal.
That's interesting choice. Because again, we don't tend to talk sport because, we're not necessarily sporty people, so I'm
definitely not. It's never been a thing that's grabbed me, and I don't really know why. My dad's a massive Hammers fan. He's a West Ham fan. My daughter is a footballer. She plays football. My son-in-law is a professional rugby league player. I've got all these sports things floating around me, but it holds no interest for me.
There's only so much you can do, and geekdom is
my brain's full of other stuff, unfortunately. Yeah. Brain's full of Deadpool.
Yeah. Right, let's jump to gigs and shows. And shows could be theatre, etc. So yeah, gigs and shows.
Two, one of which you will know because you were there, albeit not on the same day. The other one, which I'll start with, is when I was much younger. I was very lucky. I had some tickets got for me, and I don't think anyone was really aware of this person at the time when I went to see him at Her Majesty's Theatre. I went to see Lee Evans in one of his first ever gigs.
Oh, really?
And it was without a doubt one of the funniest things I have ever seen in my life.
Because he really burst onto the scene, didn't he?
Massively.
Yeah.
And it was the show where he did Bohemian Rhapsody at the end. Mm-hmm. So, if you've seen the VHS or the videos of this stuff, he did this live. He does the thing with the mic at the start, and my mother-in-law joke, and it is it was just a work of genius, and I've never seen anything like it from a comic. Because I come from a generation where comics were people like Jim Davison or Jim Tarbuck, or those sort of which were really. Now people look at them and go, Jesus Christ. I mean, but at the time when they were a bit less, we were a bit less PC, and things were a bit less than they are now. They were at times genuinely funny. I mean, Jim Davis had a hit show on TV based around snooker. These people, these people were in the mainstream. But as kind of comedy evolved, yes, you had people like Ben Elton, who was very on kind of the left wing kind of rah-rah side of things, and you had like Hale and Pace and stuff on TV and things like that. But then you never really stand up wasn't what it is now. Like in terms of this mega stardom of stand-up. And Lee Evans really kickstarted all of that. He was the one who hosted the first one at the O2 and had, however many thousands of people it was there. But to see him in what was essentially a really small, quite unique little venue was just such a joy. And it was genuine. I genuinely couldn't see most of it through the tears because I was laughing so much.
He also had that real frenetic physical energy as well, wasn't it? That was the thing. I mean, I never forget the first time I saw him on TV. I mean, he was drenched in sweat by the end of it because he had
same at the show.
Yeah.
He had a towel constantly, and he was just his suit. He had to change suits in the interval because he had a grey suit on, I think it was, and it basically turned black because he just sweated the whole way through it.
And then even him, this little British comic, or little known British comic initially bursts on the scene, and then There's Something About Mary, right?
Something About Mary. Yeah. He was in The Fifth Element. He was in, he
was
kind
in
of
The Fifth Element as well. Was he?
He's in The Fifth Element. He's one of the guys on the starships when they're at the space opera thing.
Okay, have I forgotten that?
Yeah, the aliens all burst on. He's one of the guys on the bridge, and he has a bit of interaction with. I think it's with Bruce Willis. Yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, so that was
my mind.
yeah. But so that was an absolute joy to see, and if I could do that again, I would, because it was genuinely one of the funniest things I've ever seen.
Yeah.
And my second one is obviously, and their second appearance in this podcast is Nebworth Oasis.
100%.
I went on the Saturday. I was lucky enough, again, my brother's fault. He got the tickets. And Nebworth is literally just down the road from us, right? So it was a stone's throw.
Yeah.
And I think I might have even been at college. What was it, 97?
96, 97. Have I forgotten this? Yeah.
I think it was 97.
Yeah.
Pretty sure it was 97.
Yeah.
And I was actually at college at just across the road. So at the Broadway in Stevenage, I was at college. And you literally, you walk across, you park your car and walk across the field. So that's what we did, and walked across on the Saturday to see Chemical Brothers, Prodigy, Bootleg Beatles, and the Mighty Oasis. And it was just one of the best days of my life. The sun was out, it rained in the morning, and by the time it started about 2:00, it was glorious sunshine. There was beer. I got burnt to buggery. I was so sunburnt. And then 11:30 it finishes with fireworks and I Am the Walrus, and it was just such a amazing coming together of people with a love and passion for a single band, really, that happened a stone's throw from my hometown. So I would genuinely love to experience that all over again.
I have to agree with you. I mean, I was there on a Sunday. And just looking, it was the 10th and 11th of August, 96.
Oh, it was 6. So, okay.
Like you said, it was just a brilliant day. Now, I really wanted to go on a Saturday, predominantly it was Ocean Colour Scene and Prodigy, right?
Yeah.
But I got the Sunday, and I'm not going to complain because I also saw one of my all-time favourite bands there, the Charlatans. But also got to see Manic Street Preachers, who I'm seeing this August, actually. And yeah, like you said, to have it. Oh, you still got your ticket? Yeah.
I've still got my ticket.
What was it? £22.50, I think. £22.50, right?
£22.50.
There you go.
For Ocean Colour Scene, the Prodigy, the Bootleg Beatles, and the Chemical Brothers.
Yeah.
I mean, and Oasis, by the way.
Yeah.
I'm not going to tell you how much money I paid for my Oasis tickets this
we
year.
won't go there. We won't go. Well, at least you got tickets. I'm still gutted. It's too soon. And remember, Liam, Noel, anyone, if you're listening and you got spare tickets for me, please help me out there.
They're too busy rehearsing, dude.
Yeah. It's funny though what you said. It was the opposite for me. So when we walked in, it was because I went with a mate, and you walked in, and everybody they had an ambulance there, St. John's, because people were getting sunburnt to hell. But on the way out, when I'm the Walrus was playing, it was raining, so we'd gone in the sun and we left in the rain. But
and
I
that
did
nice summer rain as well.
Yeah. I did see a couple of years ago though. I did see Liam solo at Nebworth, and that just kind of brought it all back. So
yeah, I didn't get to see him at Nebworth. I did get to see one of the last UK gigs together at Wembley when they were shortly before they bust up. And I saw them. My wife and I went to see them, and they were supported by Reverend and the Makers and Kasabian. And that was phenomenal. That was a cracking gig.
Yeah, Kasabian actually. So I saw them. They played just before Liam came on solo. So I saw him twice that year because we'd got tickets. So they do the is it the Teenage Cancer Trust? They do a series of gigs at the Royal Albert Hall. He was playing there, so we got tickets for that. And then about a month after we bought those tickets, it came up that he was playing Nebworth. So my wife said, let's do it. I said, no, we can't. She goes, yes, you can. So we got the tickets. And Kasabian came on just before him. And we didn't go for the start because some of the bands we didn't really know. And we weren't, we didn't want to be there all day. Got there for Kasabian, who, I'd liked a couple of their songs, I heard them on the radio, but hearing them live and just, again, the energy in the crowd when they come on, it was incredible. So
it blew me away live. I've always been a big Kasabian fan ever since the first album, but they really blew me away live. They were genuinely brilliant.
And again, I'm going to say it, but that's the thing, because unfortunately I lost mine. So I had to program a T-shirt and a ticket. £22.50 for all those bands and Oasis. £22.50.
Insane. And this isn't that long ago. I mean, it's long ago, but it's, it's long ago, but it shouldn't be that long ago that it makes the difference between £22.50 and £250 or whatever it is people were averaging on those tickets for Oasis, right?
But that's the thing. I can't remember at the time being in a mode where I was stressing about spending £22.50 to go to see an all-day event at Nebworth, with Oasis. I wouldn't have been in that mindset. Whereas I remember when I was trying to get tickets for Oasis this year, I remember thinking, I'm going to have a dilemma if I do get through, because I know the prices that are being quoted. I would have to think twice.
It's insane.
What a choice. So was that the two you had for this subject?
They're the two, yeah. I'm trying to keep it lean towards the end, Dan.
Right. I'm going to give you games, but do you know what? Games, because we've got gaming views, we won't necessarily go too much into it because there's another big topic.
Fine by me.
But
Fine by me.
What games would you relive?
So the first one's obvious. We've just done a deep dive on it, and it's Half-Life. I genuinely love to forget that. I play it. I certainly play the second one and its episodes, at least once a year. But the first one, I would love to kind of go, that's gone, play it again, and listen to the episode to find out why. That's not a plug. It is a plug.
Do you know what? I'm going to link it in the show notes. There you go.
The next one is an absolute beautiful piece of work, and the only game ever to make me genuinely cry within the first hour and a half, and that is The Last of Us. And I know some people have a lot of issues. I don't know why with the game. Maybe it's because it's now in the public domain as a TV show and things like that. But when it came out as a game, the work that Druckmann and the team did on that, and how they created it, and I don't think it's a spoiler, but again, for someone with small kids, playing that game at the beginning, and I hadn't read anything about it, which is unusual for me, or spoilers or anything like that, but playing that game at the beginning and playing as Joel and his daughter dying within the first kind of hour or so genuinely broke me, because I was so invested in that. Does it? That kind of thing never happens, and it, for that reason alone. We spoke about this earlier, right? I'm very much a take the highs with the lows kind of person, right? So I don't think you can have the highs without the lows. So to enjoy everything that game has, you have to go through that bit of suffrage at the beginning. And so a game that can do that to me deserves a place on this list.
Well, that's fair enough. Mass Effect for me does the same, but that's for another time. That's
Exactly
for another
right.
time. Keep an eye on gaming views. Okay, really solid start there. What's next?
Last one is a game that was my first, I guess, foray into RPGs proper. I'm not sure you can call it an RPG, but at the time that's what it would have been classed as. And one of the things that really kickstarted my love of video games when I was quite young, and that's Zelda: A Link to the Past.
Fair enough. Yeah,
You know, forget all your Froggers and your Pac-Men and things like that, which were fine and they were a bit of fun and they were like, in 5-minute bursts or whatever. This was a game that kind of was game changing for me.
Yeah.
The story, the enemies, the boss fights, the Master Swords, the whole thing just gelled together beautifully. And again, I got the Switch 2 today, and I'd totally forgotten because I have Switch Online, but it's quite prominent on the Switch. You've got the Nintendo Store piece that you've got access to a load of back catalog stuff.
Oh, yeah,
so you've got you've got the N64, you've got the GameCube, you've got the NES, you've got the SNES, and on the SNES is A Link to the Past. So I was like, I'm just going to download that and play it on the big screen. So that's what I'm going to do because I love that game so much. Yeah, absolutely brilliant.
Oh, it's three again, classics, iconics. Still in the modern mind. These games, like you said, we spoke about Half-Life ourselves. Last of Us, is everywhere, and Zelda. What a legacy there, right? So, yeah,
100%.
Okay. So, Dan, we're going to move on to the final subject, which is life moments.
Yeah. So this one for me is I've only got one, right? And I apologize up front if I get a little bit emotional because it was definitely the hardest thing I have ever been through. But also in another way, the most joyous thing I've ever been through. So I've got 4 kids, and the birth of any child is an absolute gift. It's one of the most amazing things you can experience and be a part of and grow with, right? And I love being a dad. I love my kids. 2 of them are much older, 27, 28, and 2 of them are much younger at 10 and 11. But my youngest, she was born 3 months premature. All right, to put that in perspective, she was only 26 weeks old when she was born, and she spent the first 3 months of her life in intensive care, and I spent the first 3 months of her life living between work and the hospital. So I would my wife would be at the hospital in the day. My mum would be looking after her sister, who's a little bit older. My wife would be at the hospital all day with her, and I would be at work after paternity leave, and then I would leave work and I would drive straight to the hospital, Lister, just down the road from us. And my wife would swap over and go home to care for her other one. And I would spend the evening as much as I could until probably about midnight or 2 a.m. at the hospital, and then drive back home to get a bit of sleep before I went to work. And that was kind of the cycle that I got into for 3 months. And she was very poorly. She was in an incubator for a good 6-7 weeks. She was intubated, so she had a tube. She was being fed intravenously. She was on tubes out of everywhere. And there's a song by a band called Wires, which is about a similar thing that the lead singer went through with his daughter. During that time, I think it builds this incredible bond, because what you do when your child is born so early, you have what's called kangaroo care, which is skin-to-skin contact. So they literally, the time she's not in an incubator, they put her or him on your chest, and you spend time with them just laying there. And I learnt the words to a book and used to read that, because you couldn't take books in. So you couldn't take physical objects in because of germs and things like that. So I had to learn the words in my head, and I would read the story to her over and over again. And I still read it to her sometimes now. And in that time, we saw so many families whose, unfortunately, their children didn't survive. But because of the situation you were in, they would be in the same room as you, and all they could do was put a curtain around, and you're feeling, it's almost like survivor's guilt. You're like, well, your kid's still there, but their tiny baby had just passed away. And it was one of the hardest things I've ever had to go through. But the reason it's so joyous is also because of what it's given us. in Daisy and who she is and the character that she is and how strong and fierce that she is. And so I said before, I'm one of those people who takes the highs with the lows, and I genuinely believe that. And so I know it sounds like a really strange thing to have wiped and to live through again because it was so hard, but because of what I got out of it and, outweighs the bad so much, I would do it again. I wouldn't do anything differently, but that is what I would do again, to live that experience and know that everything was going to be okay afterwards. Because that's the hardest thing, going through it and not knowing.
Yeah, no, I really appreciate you sharing that. Because, I remember you at the time. I mean, not having kids myself, you can say you can imagine, but it's hard, you can't ever understand what you're going through. And, and I think, I think I'm okay to say this, that you are a person that generally you'll go through day to day if there's issues, that it just bounces off you kind of thing, or you don't let it show. But clearly, as we said, it was a very traumatic thing for your daughter to be born that early. But, I remember kind of what you were going through and how you were feeling at the time. And look, I get it. I think what you said, people might find it unusual to live through something like that. But I think what you said is because obviously now it's got the most happiest of endings in sense of,
100%.
Your wonderful,
absolutely,
wonderful daughter.
Yeah.
And I think, I get what you're saying about it's that moment that shows you kind of what life is, right? Or what it can be. So
yeah, absolutely. And we all go through these sliding doors moments where, life can go one way or another. And thankfully for us, and sadly not for a lot of other people, it went the right way. But, like I said, it was one of those things, if I could live that again, but knowing what the outcome was going to be rather than guessing every day what it might be, that's why I'd do it. And look, you're right. It has had the best of outcomes. I mean, the kid drives me absolutely looping most days, right? But she's amazing, right? And that whenever I'm being driven nuts, I have to go, but what could it have been?
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? I'm glad she's here to drive me nuts. And that's not to say I love any of my kids any less. I absolutely don't. They are all incredible in their own way. Yeah. It's just, I know that none of them had to go through what she went through, and therefore that's why that holds a special place for me.
Oh, I get it. No, thank you for that. Thank you. It's
You're very welcome.
Well, I think we've reached the end of our topics, haven't we? You could correct me.
It's been a marathon, Dan. It's been a marathon. I apologise. I said it would be quick, and I've
no, don't
long.
apologise. This episode is always like this, and it's adding extra topics to it as I've gone along hasn't helped you.
You're smooth with the editing, Dan. It's fine.
Yeah. So when I say hello and goodbye,
that's it.
No, but I was saying to you beforehand, I love these episodes because one, the guest has to do the majority of the work, kind of joke, not joke. But no, it's fascinating. I love, whether it's a podcaster or a friend, or in your case, both. I just love getting to know what makes people tick. Do you know what I mean? Because
I can get that.
People will now hear you on Gaming Views and you're just going to be talking about games, right? But what's the music? What's the food? What's the gigs that make you you? That's the thing. That's why I love this. So
the human element, I think, is so intrinsic. It's part of what I do as a job. It's part of, knowing and understanding people is far more important than being, super technically proficient in a certain space. That's not always true. Obviously, there are people who are technically proficient and brilliant at their job. But actually, when you have to play things at a more political level or leadership level, understanding and knowing people, not in a Machiavellian way, but genuinely wanting and interested in people and their nature, can just help you in so many ways. And so I've always tried to be an open book in those sorts of things, and I will always try and continue to be, because I'm not ashamed of the things I've been through or the things I've done or where I've been or how I've grown up. Some people who kind of sit there and go, as a 49-year-old man talking about essentially, electronic toys, honestly, and it'll be the only time I do it on this podcast, I don't give a shit, because I'm me and I'm proud to be me, and I'm proud to enjoy the things I do and love my family the way I do, and and enjoy doing the things I do with you. So, those that matter don't mind, and those that mind don't matter, right?
Trust us. Here first, but trust us. We may not have the podcast then, but we'll be playing with the latest consoles when we're 59.
All day long. 59, 79.
All right,
arthritis on the controllers.
It'll be VR and eye controlled then, won't it?
God, I hope so. I'll be exhausted.
Look, Dan, thank you very, very much for doing this.
It's been my pleasure.
Do you want to plug Gaming Views one more time before we go?
Go and watch Gaming Views. It is genuinely the best gaming podcast on the planet. And I say that without any hint of irony, mainly because Dan and I are the presenters. So do it.
Look, yeah, I'll stick all the notes in the show notes. Go listen to Gaming Views. And yeah, if you want to be on this, if you've heard this and you fancy going through the same thing Dan just has, you can find me on social media at Casting Views or drop me a note at castingviewspod@gmail.com. All that's left to say is I will see you next week for another episode of Casting Views.
2, 3, 4. If I want your opinion, I will give it to you. Come on, take what we've got, 'cause you need it. Don't make us get